Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. My name is Rusty Gaylord and I am your host. Happy to have you with us here today. Fork in the Road is a conversation with business leaders who are trailblazers and doing innovative things and creative things in the world. We get to look behind the curtain at some of the forks in the road that brought them to where they are and get their perspective on what it takes to be successful. Feel free to, if you're watching live, feel free to put comments or questions in the chat. And I'm happy to introduce today David Nour. He is the founder and the head of the Nour Group, which is a strategic growth advisory firm helping companies to accelerate their growth. Happy to have him with us. Welcome, David Nour.
Rusty, it's good to be with you.
Well, let's jump into one of the many forks in the road. You've had many different changes in your career and in your life, but I want to pick one, which was your decision to become an author. And I know you just finished writing your 12th book. It's going to be coming out in February. We'll be talking more about that. But how did you get to the point where you decided it's time and I'm ready to write a book?
Sure. So this is year 20 of our business. And I initially started speaking, started to do some training and development and consulting work. And, as you introduce an idea, those that are particularly curious or interested in kind of your approach, in my case, business relationships, consistently came back and said, how do we learn more? How do I, so you introduce this process, how do I double click or go deeper or, the application of those ideas? And enough people ask where the light bulb goes off of, well, maybe I should put some of these ideas and in a compilation in some sort of a usable format, if you will. And interestingly enough, the first one I put out was a 9x12 booklet. And it was something that when I did training or coach or consulting, we self-published it. I would leave it behind. And it's one of the things that I wish I'd done sooner, because by the time, started in 2002, my first book came out in 2008. Wiley was kind enough to publish it. But you don't know what you don't know about the book business. So I went to Book Expo America. And for anybody who's an aspiring author, it is the biggest book publishing conference in the world. And it was at Jacob Javits Center in New York. I mean, it's a massive convention center. It's multi-floors, and it's anybody and everybody that has anything to do with book publishing. And I was blessed to get introduced to a literary agent who said, I like it. I'm pretty confident I can sell it. I can sell it in 6 weeks. I think Wiley would be interested. And here's the advance range. And sure enough, got me started. And again, that was book number one.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things I pick up from that. I mean, one is your willingness to jump in, right? And not just jump in and kind of dabble a little bit, but you go show up at the book conference. I'm imagining that that's not a one-time event in your life, that willingness to jump in and roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty.
Yeah. I'm paraphrasing, but you've seen the quote out there that the fundamental difference between, dreamers and doers is a bias for action, right? Yeah. So a lot of people aspire, and I've talked to a whole lot of people that aspire to, I have a dream of writing a book one day, and that's not how I'm wired. A good friend, Eric Anderson, talks often about it. I love this phrase: you have to be willing to be bad at something. Mm-hmm. And the courage to kind of have a vision and then leap, right? So I tend to jump in with both feet. You try to, especially as you get older, you try to minimize some of the risks. But you know what? Whatever the cost of that expo was worth the education opportunity for me to go learn about all things publishing, self-publishing and commercial publishing. And there's an outfit in Korea that can print your book for $3 and ship you as many as you want. And what's the credibility of an imprint on the spine of the book, and how does the book rights business work? And so I have an insatiable appetite to learn. Mm-hmm. I deeply believe in this notion of never stop growing. And there's been several phases in my life where I walked into an environment, an ecosystem, a chapter where I literally didn't know fish out of water. But you know what? The only way I'm going to learn is if I jump in and roll up my sleeves and really invest the time and effort in what I call immersive inquiry.
Yeah.
Really get in and really ask about how any and all of this works.
I think I want to pick apart the phrase jump in for a moment, because, some people would think when you say jump in, you say, well, I'm going to jump into being an author. So I'm going to quit my job. I'm not going to do anything else. And I'm just going to focus on this one thing. And what you're saying is a different version of jumping in, which is the immersive inquiry. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be walking away from everything.
No, as a matter of fact, don't. And particularly, when I started this, I had young children, and I think it's borderline irresponsible, if not reckless, to put any of that at risk. What I do love is this notion of a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
For the rest of us, doesn't mean you have to go be an Uber driver, right? But you've got a kind of a main hustle, which is I'm a consultant, I'm an advisor, but if you think of this idea of experimentation, right? And I think more of us can really bring that scientific inquiry, that scientific method to our work, which is, I have a hypothesis, and just sticking with the book theme for a second, your audience would be delighted to hear I'm not writing Harry Potter. Never gonna get wealthy writing books.
Yeah.
But books, I figured out, would be a $10 business card in my world. It's a credibility statement. I fundamentally believe I'm in the ideas business. So if I want to go deep in my brand, if I want to go elevate the credibility or repute of kind of what I bring to my global clients, this could be a good medium. And that is a hypothesis. I have no idea whether it will work or not. I have no idea whether it's valid or not. And in our conversation, I mentioned to you that I actually aim to disprove my hypotheses, right? There's no way this is going to work. But the only way I'm going to figure that out if I immerse myself in understanding how that works. And a side hustle is the best way to describe how I experiment with different business models or different services or and that's how you, by the way, Rusty, that's how you remain relevant. That's how you continue to reinvent yourself, by exploring these other growth opportunities.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say also that the side, I mean, you threw out the Uber example, right? Tongue in cheek, but the side hustle is not all about making money, and it's not all about the new business venture, but it's also overlapping. It's partially about the new business venture, but it's also overlapping with your interests, right? You've talked about being someone who's motivated by ideas, and you're excited about ideas. And so the idea of pursuing an idea and investigating it and researching it and bringing it to a point where you can share it with others must have some personal meaning to you, in addition to being good for your business.
No question. I want to remind your audience of, I think it was Jay Leno, who used his Tonight Show salary for his lifestyle. And yet he would go to Vegas on a regular basis and continue to do stand-up. And that's what funded his garage and funded his passions and other things you wanted to do. So my full-time job of consulting, coaching, speaking, that funds my lifestyle and family commitments and 2 kids in college. And those are your responsibilities. The side hustle, you're exactly right. It's a learning and growth opportunity for me. As a matter of fact, it's often an investment of time, effort, resources to do just that. Explore, experiment, hypothesize. Hey, I think if I wrote a book, it would elevate, for example, my speaking fee or my consulting breadth and depth. Great. Let's go test that idea. Let's go. And experimentation is a series of stair steps, right? So if you take something you're already doing and do it better, that's often an improvement on kind of an existing. So write a blog first, and then maybe create a series of them, and then turn that into a position paper, and kind of gauge, is there interest in your topic, right? So this idea of improving an existing product. After that, like I said, I wrote a 6 by 9 booklet. So here's something I can self-publish. Here's something that's practical, pragmatic, almost like a workbook. Then take on 200 pages. And so iteration, innovation, disruption. Iteration is doing the same thing better. Innovation is doing new things. Disruption is doing new things that makes the old obsolete. And that's the stair step I tend to think of in these side hustles. And Rusty, I got to tell you, they directly contribute back to the core business.
Yeah. I think that's an important point, and I want to just explore that, because when we think, many people, and I fall into this camp, when I think about a side hustle, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm already hustling, right? It's like I've already got my day job, then I've got a family. If I'm lucky, I've got a little time for myself for exercise or something. Like, to add something else on the side, where am I going to get the time for that?
Yeah.
And yet, because it feeds back into your business, I think it's important I think it's relevant to think of it as an element of your business. And some portion of your time should be devoted to those things.
No question. I want your audience to capture this number of 168. It's the total number of hours we all have in any given week. Now, presumably, you're going to have to sleep some of that, and you're going to have to eat some of that, and hopefully spend some time with your family and loved ones. So that you're exactly right, that the number of available hours for all of us to work is limited. And I got to tell you, I'm a big believer that we're all products of the advice we take. And a mentor drove into me years ago that real wealth is discretionary time. I can always make more money, but I can't get that time back. And again, I've got grown kids, and one of my biggest regrets is that I missed a lot of their growing up, and you can't get that back. So I actually think of it the other way. And again, this is from another mentor. I try to proactively spend a third of my bandwidth on me and my family, a third for profit, and a third for nonprofit. And the mistake I made when I first heard a mentor tell me that, is I told him, well, that's a great aspiration. And he said, Nour, it's not an aspiration, it's a choice. So you're exactly right that my hustle, my full-time job, is about a third of my total bandwidth. And the side hustle is my R&D function. The side hustle is my exploration of how will I remain relevant? How will I reinvent myself? How will I not become stagnant when I reach the arc of what I'm doing today? And that's how I've been able to, I think, remain relevant in the 20 years of doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think there's an element that it's important to emphasize in there, which is the R&D function is not R&D for the sake of generating ideas because it's stimulating and exciting and interesting, but is generating ideas that you can do something with. And to apply that to someone who's in the midst of their career, it's great if you want to go read another book or take a class or get an MBA or do something like that. But the question is always, how are you going to apply those things?
Yeah, no question. And I wrote in my most recent book, Curve Benders, the arc of any job is about 3 to 5 years. So think about it. Within 3 to 5 years, you've figured out where the coffee is. You've figured out what to do and how to do it. You've learned a job. And it's become, let's be honest with ourselves, it becomes kind of routine, right? And you get on this autopilot. And organizations do this that I think will be very relevant for individuals, which is your personal S-curve. So early on, there's a downshift because there's a diminishing return. You're investing time, effort, resources. But then you kind of figure out what's relevant and how to do this. And you start to excel at it. And you hit your stride. And you're really good at this. You're making money. You're efficient. You're delivering value. All that stuff is great until you reach a plateau. And at that plateau, you have 3 options and 3 options only. Either you're going to jolt some excitement into it and reinvent kind of what you're doing. You're going to hit the next S-curve that you've invested in while the things were going great. And now you're, again, reinventing yourself. You're hitting that next growth trajectory. Or you're going to decline. And the decline shows up in how you show up. When you're hitting the snooze button for the 10th or 12th time in the morning, let's be honest, you're not excited about what you're doing. It's time to go do something else. If you wing it, right? And how many people you and I have met that have been in the same job for so long? Oh, yeah, I'll just show up to that meeting, and they wing it. And that's when a 2x4 comes their way with a rusted nail in it, right? Because they didn't prepare. So I'm a big believer of, if you don't reinvent yourself, if you don't immerse yourself in these personal S-curves, you're just going to really struggle to remain relevant.
Yeah. And, so that I called the title of this, throw out the stopwatch and use your compass. Uh, and that phrase came from a conversation that we were having, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that, because it's this reinventing yourself requires the compass, right? It
No,
requires the sense of where am I headed?
no question. And again, it was an advice from an incredible mentor who, we especially in the spring of our careers, we're always trying to hustle, right? I'm trying to get to the next job, or I'm trying to get to the next sale, or I'm trying to do next project, whatever it is, we're hustling. And time and the stopwatch of how fast I can do something is a big priority for us. And this particular mentor said, listen, throw away your stopwatch, get a compass. And what it was really referring to is, and more recently, I've coined the phrase of your journey from now to next. You can't be me, just like I can't be some of my mentors. So what's the best version of you? What does that look like? And how do we map this journey of where you are today to where you want to get to? So whether it's I'm a frontline contributor today and I want to become a director or a manager or a vice president. Great. What does that look like? What has to happen for you to get there? If you don't have that compass, if you don't have that destination and hopefully ultimate, direction and destination, you're going to be rudderless. And you see this in people's resumes. You see this in their career history. You see them jumping not just jobs and companies, but across industries. And you can't understand where they were going and how they got there and why they went certain directions they did. So really critical for, I think, all of us. And the pandemic has certainly contributed to that, right?
Yeah.
Helping you understand, where am I going? How am I going to get there? You don't have to have all the answers, but at least have some directional guidance or some trajectory of, here's where I like to end up in 18 months or 3 years from now.
Yeah. I find that's challenging for a lot of people. And I think part of that challenge comes from the expectation that where am I going to be 18 months or 3 years from now? Most people will say, well, the next level job, making more money, because that's just, so many of us just been trained that that's what we should be striving for. But you could just as easily say, I want this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model, right? Like 18 months from now or 2 years from now, I want to be in that different balance of the way I'm allocating my time and energy towards myself, towards my business, and towards other endeavors, that the nonprofit sector that you described.
No question. And the societal norms have molded us to constantly reach for that next rung in the ladder without really understanding, am I on the right ladder? And Rusty, I use the analogy of, we sharpen a lot of machetes and we cut down a lot of trees, and we never ask, am I in the right jungle? And I think that'd be a really good introspection for a lot of people. Are you in the right jungle? Are you excited about it? And again, a personal story. 2002, I'd left a private equity role, and my daughter was born in Denver. I asked my wife, what do you want to do? She said, I want to be a full-time mom. I said, great, let's go back to Atlanta. We have family, friends, and infrastructure. I interviewed for a whole bunch of jobs. I was, president of a company, and I was several executives of tech companies, and I couldn't find anything I got real excited about without the perception that they were venture backed and the rug was going to get pulled out from under you for no fault of your own, right? So I talked to my wife, and she said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I was happiest when I was on my own. She said, do it. I said, honey, we might be poor for a little while. She's like, I don't care, do it, because I don't want you to be like several of our friends who had great comp packages and great titles and on and on and on, but they're miserable. And that's just not the way you're going to be excited about getting up in the morning and tackling what you're doing. So really, again, you don't have to have that 18 months or 36 months crystal. None of us have a crystal ball. If we did, I'd be on the next flight to Vegas. But if you have some idea or direction of what makes you happy, what scenarios will let you be your best? When are you? Give me an example of when this is, and I incorporate this in some of my coaching. Give me a scenario when you were unequivocally at your best. Let's go create that environment. Let's go create an environment where you're just going to thrive. And the other thing I deeply believe in is this idea of you got to light a fire within people, because lighting a fire under them just doesn't last.
Right.
What is that drive? What is that tenacity? What is that resolve? What is that go-gettedness that's going to, regardless of your age, It's going to
Mm-hmm.
push you to get up and go chase something. That's
Oh
the
yeah,
compass that I think the mentor was referring to.
absolutely. And so one of the things I found is oftentimes when you say, what is that scenario that really lights you up, that really gets you fired up to go make a difference? Oftentimes people will describe something. They have the ability to shape their existing situation, to bring that scenario into their existing situation. So it's not even, I need to go change jobs, I need to go leave, I need to start my own business. It's not even any of that. It can just be becoming aware of what it is that really lights you up and energizes you, and
No
then being
question.
deliberate about bringing it into your job.
Yeah, and this is that R&D function. This is that side hustle that we've been talking
Yeah.
about, right? So I have an hypothesis that I think I want to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Go try it. Go learn about it. Go talk to people who are doing it. Go explore that. Whether it's I want to start a franchise or I want to, and I read a really interesting article that the great resignation is becoming the great regret because it was the grass was very much greener on the other side, and I jumped ship. I changed companies, I changed jobs, I moved geographies, I did whatever, and now I'm regretting having left what was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because you weren't as diligent
Yeah.
in your due diligence of, I apologize, your due diligence of where am I going? How am I
Yeah.
going to get there? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Will I be in a position to be at my best in this next role opportunity chapter? And that's really what I want for most people. I want for your listeners is this R&D, this side hustle function we've been talking about is a chance for you to explore what does that reinvention of you look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I think that to tie that back into this idea of experimentation, but to do the experimentation without having to leave what you're doing now, right? That's the R&D function or the side hustle, whatever we want to call that. That's the ability to learn without having to shift lanes entirely.
Absolutely. And again, full disclosure, I kind of run my own firm. It's a lot easier for me to go do this. If you've got a
Sure.
job and you're working with somebody, ideal if you have a manager, boss, leader that believes in that notion of you being a exceptional talent and your need to learn and grow and try different things. It could be different projects, it could be different parts of the business, it could be different accounts. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I'm going to go back to the idea of the arc of any job. 3 to 5
Mm-hmm.
years, you know how to do that job. So what can we change about the ecosystem, about the job, about what you're doing and how you're doing it? And again, none of us have a crystal ball. So I really like this idea, and I coach a lot of clients to build a culture of experimentation where we build hypotheses and we go test them, and we're either going to validate or we're going to void. That's the right direction for us to go. We should launch this. We should not launch that. A brilliant woman named Elizabeth Dixon, who was at Chick-fil-A, took a course that I taught at an Emory's executive education program, and she pursued a lot of really innovative experiences for Chick-fil-A to the point where the chairman of the company taps her to now go lead a completely different initiative outside of the restaurant business. That's how you identify that next job, that next chapter, that next opportunity, is by creating opportunities to experiment, having bosses, having mentors, having coaches that really give you the opportunity to go do that.
Yeah. Nour, this is a fantastic conversation. We could go on and on. You have shared a lot of interesting points, but as we move towards wrapping up, I just want to end with one, which is what would be a way for people to connect with you or learn more about you and hear about what you're up to?
Sure. So easiest is just our website, Nour, Nour group.com. You can also just Google my name, David Nour, and you'll find all kinds of articles and videos and blogs. I've got a Forbes and Inc. columns. So there's a lot of good plethora of content out there that you can learn from. I would also invite, Rusty, both you and your audience to come join us in, we've built a private online community called the Nour Forum. So if they go to nourgroup.com/forum, there's no cost to it, but it's like-minded professionals that are talking about relationships and innovation and reinvention and leadership. Come join us, and would love to continue the conversation.
Sounds great. And I just want to put a plug in. I just broaden out the picture here to Relationship Economics coming out in February, and Curve Benders, which is available now. Both two of your a dozen of books that you've published. So you can check those out as well. Nour, thank you so much for being here for a great conversation today.
Rusty, thanks for having me.
All right.